Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today, it's just me in the studio. It's a very busy time of year for Pat, and so today I just thought I would record a solo podcast talking a little bit about airsoft content creation and consumption, and specifically as it relates to sort of my relationship with content creation and consumption. This came up recently in a conversation with a few people, and I thought it would be an interesting thing to cover because I think I've mentioned bits and pieces of it sort of here and there throughout the run of the show, but never really all in one place. So I figured it would be a pretty good thing to broach in a sort of solo episode. As I mentioned, given that Pat is still quite tied up with the end of year and so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's get to it. And I think the first thing I want to talk about and sort of mention is that really I don't consume much, if any, airsoft content. And I never really have. And I want to talk a little bit about sort of the logistics of why that is and sort of why that is today. So, first, it's important to remember that when I started playing airsoft, it was 2006. So, YouTube was really only just getting off the ground at the time. And there wasn't much airsoft content to be had in general. I remember in pretty early, well, actually, it's the late aughts, but maybe like, 2008, I probably bought like a Contour HD camera that I mounted to the side of my helmet or whatever. But like making videos was not really a thing that, especially in the early days, existed. And it's relevant. I'll talk about that later. At the time, most of the stuff that we were listening to, or most of the stuff we were talking about, excuse me, about airsoft, was done on the Airsoft Canada forums. It was talking to people on posts about replicas and gear and game types and all that kind of stuff, and people boasting about how they had more games played than posts on Airsoft Canada and like all this kind of stuff, right? And that's where airsoft social media really existed. And then you'd sometimes hear about bigger events where people would sort of post their experiences with their AARs, or post maybe a video that they had uploaded somewhere. But the actual videos about airsoft were at the time pretty limited. In 2006, super limited. So from 2006 to about 2009, most of my airsoft related content consumption was either TV or movies, and thinking about how you could recreate that in airsoft. I mean, Pat often mentions we did sort of the, USMC style kind of thing because of Generation Kill, or like we were wearing multicam because that was, what was popular in like TV and movies, like that kind of stuff. And then also, we were also trying to look at other types of TV, like if you guys remember, there was a show on Military Channel called Special Ops Mission with Will Willis. And they had Will Willis doing all these kinds of like special ops missions. Hence the name of the show, Gun Against Op 4, blah, 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 this kind of stuff. Anyways, point is, we were watching that and thinking about, hey, how could we translate that to airsoft? And actually, that show inspired one of the very first asymmetric airsoft events that we ever did up at Red Cliff, which eventually turned into Operation Asgardian Chill, which Pat ran, which was one of the like formative airsoft operations for the Storm Riders as a team. But I digress. So I was looking at that kind of stuff in 2006, 2009. And then the other thing we were looking at were like the Magpul Dynamics videos, right? With Chris Costa and and Travis Haley. And like that fueled our airsoft training for years, right? And so we were looking at that content and running, airsoft drills for people in the community based on what we were seeing in those drills. And we would behave the way that they behaved in that. And some of the real steel stuff we knew didn't really apply, but whatever, right? There's almost no videos broadly available about airsoft teching, reviewing gears, doing gameplay, all the stuff that's super commonplace today. When I started playing airsoft, that didn't really exist. It's not until like the late aughts and the early 2010s that YouTube became a lot more ubiquitous and people were starting to become famous on YouTube and becoming YouTubers, and as a career started becoming a thing. And when airsoft really exploded in popularity, airsoft videos started to surface on YouTube as well. And as you know, Jet the Desert Fox, for example, started uploading videos in 2010, but his channel only started to gain notoriety in 2013, which is the same year that Novrich started posting videos and kicked off the wave of airsoft sniper content. And then other creators like Silo, Swamp Sniper, they followed in 2015, 2016, and so on and so forth. And it's worth mentioning that by the time these videos were coming onto YouTube, right, the first time I came across a Jet Desert Fox video, I was 29 years old and I'd already been playing airsoft for 6 years, or over 6 years, in fact. And that's really important context because at the peak of my airsoft excitement, when I was the most interested in talking about airsoft 24/7, when I was toying with the idea of moving away from Newfoundland to Ontario to be able to play more airsoft and be more serious about it, right? There was almost no airsoft content available for me to consume, right? At that time, I would always handle my replicas. I would practice at home. I would throw my kit on. I'd take pictures of myself in my kit. I would train in it. And I'm sure we've all been in that phase. And maybe you're in that phase right now, in which case, soak up every possible minute, right? But the phase where airsoft was everything to me and I wanted to play as much as I could and spend every minute of my spare time thinking about airsoft, how to get better, how to get faster, how to get more accurate, all that stuff. I did not have access to the kinds of videos that exist today, right? And if I had, I likely would have been obsessed with them, but I didn't have them. So I was not consuming airsoft content at that time because it didn't exist. And later on in the 2010, 2011, when we started expanding and growing the Storm Riders team, some of our newer members who hadn't been playing as long as I was, and they were in the sort of honeymoon phase of airsoft, started discovering some airsoft content out there. And at the time, the Green Mountain Rangers in particular were a highlight for some of our members and were seen as aspirational. Not a great look perhaps in retrospect, but hey, live and learn. Regardless, at that time, even outside of a scattered video, I wasn't really watching a lot of airsoft content either because I was, sort of past that exciting phase and really into the sort of, let's call it maintenance phase of airsoft that I've been in for a really long time. Airsoft is obviously a huge part of my life. I mean, if it weren't, we probably, we would not be having this conversation today, right? But it is only one of many hobbies amongst my other responsibilities that take up my time in the day. I spend a fair amount of time working on airsoft content creation, thinking about podcast ideas, writing them up, doing interviews, creating content, all this kind of stuff. But when it comes to the rest of my spare time and specifically my content consumption, there's a lot of other things that I look for, right? Part of that is also that the type of airsoft content that is popular is not really the kind of content that I really want to watch, but I'll talk about that later. But for me, I've always been a curious person and a lifelong learner. So the kinds of stuff I want to enjoy watching in my downtime are things that teach me about things, either sort of just raw knowledge, just learning about, how nuclear reactors work as an easy example, or practical knowledge in some way that helps me improve the other things that I have going on in my life, whether that's, watching running form tutorials or watching, airsoft training montages that explain the purpose of training, stuff like that, right? And when I started making videos in 2015, I was looking to create the kind of content I wanted to watch, something that helped people who are playing airsoft learn about airsoft in a way that could help them improve their airsoft experience by virtue of becoming, a better player, being more effective. And I felt like I had also accumulated a fair amount of knowledge that I wanted to sort of pass on to members of the members of the airsoft community. Something that I had done throughout the years by organizing training sessions in with our local groups, and whether it's the Magpul Dynamics inspired one or others. But I felt that sort of creating videos to share that message out was sort of the next logical step. And I really didn't see a whole lot, if not any videos talking about leadership in airsoft, how to create a successful team in airsoft, or even how to, have an effective training session, or even indeed what kind of training is effective for airsoft, which isn't to say that my opinions at the time hasn't changed over the years, right? I've evolved in my thinking, but at the time I didn't see any of those videos and I'm like, man, I wish they existed, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. One of our very first videos, we did a gear overview video, but then the second video I think on our channel, if you go back, is about leadership. It's talking about the concept of being an effective leader, and not a combat leader, just a leader, right? How do you actually successfully lead people? And if you look at what the content that was available at the time, there really wasn't a whole lot, and I'm not sure that there actually is a whole lot of airsoft specific content about leadership and those sort of topics, right? And so as I started considering this, and as I was thinking about this for this episode, there's really a couple of different things that sort of crept up in my mind in terms of questions, right? How can I create successful airsoft content if I don't consume airsoft content myself? Or indeed, I mean, I'm not saying that we're successful by any stretch of the imagination, but how can my content be good if I'm not watching the kind of content that other people are watching? Does it make me a hypocrite to create this type of content without actually consuming it elsewhere? And if I'm not consuming it, like, am I even aware of what airsofters want for their content? And as I was thinking about these questions, like, a lot of different stuff started sort of bubbling in my mind. And the first thing I think that I wanted to talk about is that largely I kind of don't care. And what I mean by that is I don't really care what airsofters in general want from their content. What matters to me is I want to create the kind of content that I would want to watch. And if other people are interested in watching that kind of content, then so much the better. But I'm not really interested in making content specifically that will get other people to watch if that's not the kind of thing that I want to do myself. And I'll talk about later sort of why that is. Um, but one thing that I think is really important is that just because I don't watch airsoft content doesn't mean that I don't know what kind of airsoft content is popular. Firstly, as a creator on YouTube and Spotify, we get a lot of analytics about what people are searching for and how they discover our content and the types of keywords that they're looking for, right? So I have a fair understanding of what people are searching for in order to find airsoft content in general. And then also there's the algorithm and sort of what people are being pushed more often, not depending on what the platform is interested in. So obviously, if you think about YouTube, for example, I mean, right now they're really big on podcasts. So if you create podcasts on YouTube, chances are you will reach a broader audience than, say, creating a long form video or something of that nature. Flashback, a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was shorts. YouTube shorts was a really big thing. You were creating shorts, you were getting pushed out there, so on and so forth, right? Um, One of the things, though, that is absolutely true, and this is not just true of airsoft YouTube, but just YouTube in general, is over the years, we've seen an increase in what I would call like extremeness of content. So as content creators, you're always trying to create something new that will engage people in some way. I'll talk about sort of what that looks like a little bit in a little bit. But um, if you think about sort of what videos were on to get clicks, on YouTube, 5, 6 years ago, a video could have been, hey, we're giving away $20,000 to the person who can sit in this car the longest, right? And now that's escalated to the point where that video has to be, we're giving away $1 million to the first person who can extinguish this forest fire naked with only a bottle of water and a blanket, right? Just crazy stuff. And airsoft is no different from that, right? So you have these Mr. Beasts and stuff who are doing this crazy stuff on YouTube, and you see the subset of that on airsoft, right? On airsoft YouTube, right? So initially a video could have been like, oh, I played airsoft in this really cool place, or check out this airsoft event I attended with a helicopter, that kind of stuff. And now it's like, oh, I'm doing a halo insertion into the world's first 100-hour milsim or whatever. I mean, maybe not exactly that, but sort of get the idea. It's this natural progression. Your video has to give the viewer something they haven't seen before or some reason to click on it. And for the vast majority of people who are looking at content, it's that sort of shock value, novelty value that they are seeking on sort of like their discovery pages and stuff. If you have a specific thing that you're looking for, that's a different story. I mean, I consume a lot of airsoft content that is explaining to me how to fix something that I've broken or what have you. But when it comes to just airsoft entertainment content or educational content, they have to have a reason to sort of click on it, right? So if you look at creators today, what they're doing when they're doing reviews or product comparison is even more extreme than it was before. So you will find videos that are like, I saw one from WAG Entertainment, which is like the top 5 airsoft guns for under $50, and that video has close to 2 million views on YouTube. Right? They'll do crazy modifications. It's like, oh, can we build a $13,000 airsoft gun and stuff like that? All these crazy um, sort of extreme of content to get people to click on it, to be like, oh my god, how could they do that, or what does that look like? I remember many years ago having conversation with Chris about like doing like a top 3 list or a top 5 list, because he's like, anytime I see a list that's like a top 5 X, I'm going to click on that to see like, do I do any of these or do I not do any of these, right? And it's this idea of like, what am I getting from this video right out the gate? And if it's not going to be novelty, right? If it's not going to be that extremeness and it's not going to be something specifically that you're looking for, one very common method of creating content that resonates with people is to do so on an emotional level, either through catharsis or, very unfortunately, but very frequently, making them upset. I'm sure we've all seen, and will continue to see tremendous amounts of videos about cheating, right? Headshot videos, freakout videos, videos of high skilled players absolutely demolishing the opposition. And yeah, I've often joked on this show and on the Discord that if I really wanted to make a successful airsoft video, I'd have to call it something like Navy SEAL sniper destroys cheaters headshot compilation video, something like that, right? And it's a bit of a joke, but it's also not far from the truth. Like, those are the kinds of things that people will go and will click on because they just sort of, out of pure curiosity, or also either when it comes to freak out videos or cheater videos, out of catharsis or rage. I mean, I'm sure we've all played games where we're playing against people who aren't calling their hits, they're cheating, etc. And the only thing we want more is just for them to get totally rocked, and that doesn't happen. So you get home and you get pushed a video of someone going out there and making cheaters pay, and then you can sort of feel that catharsis of like, well, I couldn't get the cheater at my field, but at least Navrich is like demolishing these guys and like shooting them in the head, and that feels kind of good, right? And that's not an indictment of this type of airsoft content, because it obviously appeals to a lot of people, but that's not the kind of content that I want to watch. And more importantly, it's not the kind of content that I want to make. So when it comes to my consumption of airsoft content, I think we went through a phase where it was just not available. And now, where we are with the kind of content that really makes it big, isn't really what I want to get out of airsoft. The other day on the Discord, Huck asked a really great question, which I totally trolled, but I'll talk about it now. It's like, why do you play airsoft? Right? And a lot of the answers in our community were about the people. It was about the community, right? You have a couple of jokesters like me who gave troll answers, but fundamentally, like, when I think about airsoft today and what it is for me today, it's not really about feeling cool in my gear like it was when I started. It's not about feeling like a super hardcore operator, which is super cringe when I think back to feeling that way when I was much younger. Like, it's not at all about and it's certainly not about winning or defeating other people. It's really about going out there with my teammates, with my friends, with my community members, having a great time, pushing myself and doing the best that I can, no matter the outcome, right? And so when you look at what type of content is available out there, um, there's a fair amount of that doesn't really resonate with me. Then on the flip side, you also have a lot of like content about gear and gear reviews. And in fact, you have a lot of, when you look at the demographics, like, you have a lot of younger people and then a lot of beginners who are looking at our content. And it's no sort of secret that the episodes that do the best tend to be tailored to sort of beginners, right? 5 tips for beginners is the biggest video that we have. It's got almost 1 million views, I think. And then you're looking at the top 3 upgrades for AEGs, which we recorded, last decade. and so probably deserved a bit of an upgrade. But we're not doing a lot of AEG teching nowadays anyway. But that's beside the point, right? I have a good idea of the type of content that would do well or could do well. That doesn't necessarily mean that even if I made those videos, they would succeed, because the reality of the algorithm is you have to get really lucky. When I published the top 5 tips for beginners back in 2000, whatever it was, 2015, 2016, regardless, we got really lucky that that video got viral, and we got, 6 or 7,000 followers pretty quickly, and we've ballooned up to 25,000 or 26,000. But really, it's been stagnant since then, right? And that's because the type of content that we create is not really the type of content that the algorithm wants to push to people, and that's fine. Because the reality is that the vast majority of people who are looking for airsoft content are not looking for the kind of content that we make. A lot of people who play airsoft, it's just a hobby. They want to have a bit of fun. They want to go, shoot their friends and do whatever. And they don't take it seriously. They don't necessarily see it as an educational opportunity. They don't necessarily see it as a hard skill that they want to improve on or what have you. And that's totally, totally fine. We've talked about that many times on the show. Airsoft is a big tent. There's space for everybody. Um, but the reality is that the type of content that we make is a subset of a super niche hobby. So it's never going to be really big. And even if we were successful, like, I have no aspiration of even like going anywhere near some of the bigger YouTubers like Novrich and Silo and etc. Right? These are guys who are doing exactly the content that the average airsofter wants to watch, and kudos to them because they do it really well, and their production value is really great. And they make content that resonates with people. It doesn't resonate with me, but that's okay, right? I'm not the average airsoft viewer. The thing that I've talked about, I think, on this show, and I want to make sure that people who are listening, if you're the kind of person who wants to create content, I think you need to make the kind of content that you enjoy making, because there is no guarantee that your stuff is ever going to go viral and pick up any traction. And so if you are not only making something that you don't enjoy, that is a chore, and it's not getting the reception that you want, that is a recipe for just burning out, for not doing something that you enjoy, right? And on the flip side of that, when I think about the people who listen to our show, and I think about the people who've watched our videos, because believe it or not, like, we have a YouTube channel where we have videos. Some people are just discovering this podcast, and they don't realize that we have a backlog of videos of tips and tricks and everything else. And that's fine, because they are pretty far back. We're on episode 200 something of Call Your Hits, so you have to go pretty far back to find them. And it might be better if Call Your Hits were separated into separate channel or what have you, but we're not really big enough for that kind of nonsense. So it's going to stay the way that it is. But regardless, I think, you know, the average person who is listening to our show and coming back to it is the kind of person who this content resonates with, and who makes, who can take the message out of this and understand sort of what we're trying to share and what our vision for airsoft is. And at the end of the day, that leads to creating the kind of community around your content that our Discord community has turned into, but also I think the kind of community that we have in our local community as well. I think when we look at where we are, in airsoft in St. John's in particular, we have a very positive, welcoming community that shares a lot of the same values that we aspire to in our Discord as well, right? The idea of welcoming people and not judging them for, wearing gardening gloves instead of mechanics gloves, right? This conversation actually happened on the Discord today, right? What's the issue with wearing gardening gloves? It's like, oh, well, it's not operator, whatever. Who cares, right? It doesn't matter. You have gardening gloves, cool. You have gloves. That's the main thing, right? Next time you can look at mechanics or whatever else, flight gloves, cut them up like Pick was suggesting, cut them down and then put the paracord, whatever. Like, there's all kinds, but we're never going to judge you for that, right? People come to our Discord and they talk about how in other communities they got flamed for posting XYZ, right? You go to a night vision community and you start talking about digital night vision, and they'll basically laugh you out of town. in our community, that will never fly. Like, yeah, you might get the stink eye from Jordan about digital night vision, but like he's never going to mock you and make you feel like, a piece of crap and force you out of the community. Like, that's not the kind of space that we have created. Well, Jordan might. Eh, maybe not. I don't know. Jury's still out. But the point is, that's not the kind of community that we have. When we post pictures of our kits, nobody is saying to anybody else, "Oh, wow, that's embarrassing. That's super far." Like, that's not the space that we've created, and that comes, I believe, from this sort of grassroots place that our channel started. We've never um, presumed to be anything other than what we are, which is what I've always wanted to be, which is education, right? We want to take the knowledge and opinions that we have, and yeah, they change over time, and sometimes we're wrong about stuff, and we're open to being corrected. But taking that knowledge, taking those thoughts, taking the experience that you had with airsoft and imparting that to other people so that they can, learn from your mistakes, avoid some of the things that you've done that have set you back, um, potentially ignore you and make the same mistakes, and that's fine, but at least equipping them with the tools. And making that kind of content to me feels really good. And it feels good because I can think about how it would have made me feel if a video like that had existed when I started playing airsoft. Finding a video about airsoft specific tactics in 2010, as I mentioned earlier on, was nigh on impossible, right? But then we started creating videos about like recon tips and tricks for airsoft, or camouflage and concealment, and how, yeah, there are lots of videos out there on camouflage and concealment, but how does it actually relate to airsoft, and how is it different? What are the things that you need to consider as an airsofter compared to what you might see in like a Brent0331 video or whatever his name is, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. Like, those are the kinds of things that didn't exist. And so when you create that content, or when I create that content, I can think about someone listening to that and going like, "Oh, wow, I've never thought about it that way. That's a really good point." And just that is enough for me to want to keep doing it. Like, even this episode today, right? Someone who is making YouTube videos for themselves. I think about on the Discord, we have a younger fella on the Discord. His name is Taylor. Like, Taylor making a video. Like, if he listens to this episode, and I hope that he does, but maybe he won't, whatever. But if he listens to this episode and then hears me say, I don't like creating the type of content that I don't like myself, regardless of what the algorithm wants or what I perceive the algorithm wants, and he thinks, hey, actually, that's a great point. I made that video and I only made it because I thought it would do well, but I actually didn't really like it. I'm not going to do that again. Like, if he has that reaction, well, for me, I'm like, cool. That's what I'm looking for. That's the gratification portion of creating this type of content. And there have been videos that I've done in the past that, looking back on it, like, I didn't really feel good necessarily about making those videos. I did them. I think about like the battery video. I think we did a battery video, um, which actually I think does have some pretty good content, but it was done in the context of doing an ad read for Tenergy batteries, which, by the way, are still totally fine. I have no problem with that company whatsoever. I think their products was good, but in doing that, they asked for me to say some specific things, right, in exchange for the consideration for the video. And like, I remember doing that and thinking, like, you know what, like, I don't actually like this. It doesn't feel good. I don't think that this is the kind of thing that I want to do in future. Like, was it nice to make a bit of money? Yeah, sure. Was it nice to get like a free battery charger and some batteries to test? Like, yeah, that was nice. But at the same time, like, I felt sort of hamstrung by what they were asking me to say, and sort of I would give them the write up, and then they would say, "Hey, can you make some modifications? Can you say this? Can you say that? Can you make sure to say certain things?" And I was like, "That okay, yeah." They're not asking me to say anything other than what I think about these chargers, but the language was very specific. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I didn't really like it. Compare that to the work that we've done with Flamingo. And like, I love the Flamingo products. Did I receive those products to test for free? Yes, I did. But Did I receive any instructions at all whatsoever on what I should or should not say or how I should say it? No. They were the chillest guys to work with. And it turns out their product actually kind of rocks. So it was very easy for me to create a video that helped tell people about how excited I am about these products because all of that is true, right? The video that I did about the battery charger, like, yeah, I used it a little bit, but this isn't a product that I was head over heels over. It's just like, hey, it's a battery charger and it works fine and you can run it off your car. That's pretty sick. Cool, whatever. But like these grenades, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like you can do this, you can do that, like the potential and so on and so forth. And so in that way, that was a very different experience. And that when I think about that, that's sort of where I wanted to take, my content in the sense of, well, we're sharing information that helps people make good decisions, better decisions, perhaps change the way they play airsoft for the better, right? And so, yeah, as I reflect about why I don't consume airsoft content, the vast majority of it comes down to this idea like, how much content is there out there being regularly created by people that is airsoft specific that really is there to help educate you, right? And more to the point, I think as well, after playing airsoft for so long, the amount of things that I need to be educated on, the list is not to say that I'm done learning airsoft by any stretch of the imagination, but the list is kind of short. So yeah, I need to be educated about HPA, but I'm not subscribed to people or I'm not going and being pushed airsoft content teaching me about HPA. I'm seeking that content out to educate myself, which I think is an important distinction. Um, but like channels that are, I remember for a while before it, changed to whatever it is now. Like Garantham's channel was a lot of really educational content about military stuff, whether it was boots or gear or webbing and stuff. And now I think they're more into like the real steel firearms reviews and stuff, or like pseudo scientific tests and stuff like that, which is less interesting. But regardless, entertaining nonetheless. Don't get me wrong, but like at the time, it was a lot of educational stuff, and I found that very helpful. And you don't necessarily see that kind of stuff. You do see gear reviews and stuff, but again, the type of content that you see for airsoft is really geared more towards the casual airsoft gamer, the younger airsoft crew, speed softers as well, which is totally cool. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's not what I'm looking for from content. And if you have recommendations of educational YouTube channels that are about airsoft topics that are not just like gear reviews or whatever, that are about more esoteric concepts like leadership and all this kind of stuff, like I would happily take the recommendation. You can feel free to throw it at me on the Discord. But so that's the notion behind airsoft content with me and how I consume it and also how I create it. And I think I've mentioned it, but I really do feel, and I think I've heard this advice from many big airsoft YouTubers, and I am not a big airsoft YouTuber at all. But I've heard this advice before, which is you have to make the kind of content that you want to make. You have to do the things that you think are interesting and that add joy to your day. Um, and I joked on the Discord, a little while ago, that I was sort of in a prison of my own making, which is that I'm stuck, quote unquote, making these podcast episodes for you guys, right? And that I have to make them because I have to deliver on them for you every Wednesday. But the reality of it is that if I didn't enjoy doing this, if I didn't enjoy sitting in front of my computer or talking to my camera or talking to Pat or talking to guests and hearing about airsoft from all around the world, I wouldn't do it, right? I have a day job. I'm certainly not doing this for the money because again, our channel is not that big. It's about creating content and putting stuff out there that appeals to me and that I think is going to be useful and add stuff to people and their lives, to you, the listener. If you're listening to this, like I hope that this adds something to your day, whether it makes it a little bit easier on your drive to work and you have something to listen to, or gives you some context to think about that, hey, this is Phil's mindset about certain things. And maybe that resonates with me. Or maybe you think I'm just, off my rocker and I'm looking at this incorrectly, or I should be managing my channel differently, or whatever that is. Like, I hope this adds something to your day. There's a lot of there's a lot of things in our world that subtract, right? There's a lot of things that you can get into that take away. And I firmly believe that if you are seeking out negative energy in, your content, that's sort of how it's going to leave you feeling. And we really, I really want you to feel positive when you hear, when you listen to us, when you engage with our content, when you engage in our community. I want you to feel like it's adding, it's adding to your day, it's adding to your life, it's helping you in some way, or at the very least, it's just giving you a laugh, making you smile, and making your this portion of your day a little tiny bit easier. Um, and for the vast majority of airsoft content I've bumped into, that doesn't really do it for me. So that's why I make this stuff. That's why I engage with you guys, and fundamentally, it's why the Discord community is such a point of pride, and why all of you listening, who are members of our community, make me so grateful and happy, because it means that in a very real, tangible way, what we had been trying to accomplish by creating these videos, we succeeded in some ways and continue to succeed, because some of you, not Tullen, clearly, but some of you still listen to these episodes. Some of you listen to them often, Matt, more than once, right? Um, and it just shows that when you create the kind of things that you want to see, the right kinds of people will gravitate towards it, and you will create a community of peers, that, in our case, will help each other, build each other up, and provide a little bit more joy, happiness, and experience and ease into your airsoft. So that's really all I want to talk about today. A bit of a shorter episode, but I think a worthy one nonetheless. Hopefully, you found my point of view on this at least a little educational, interesting at the very least, and helps you a little understand sort of where I land on the whole airsoft social media YouTube video landscape. Um, but yeah, that's all I've really got for you this week. Hopefully, we will return to our more regular routine programming next week, as classes will be well and truly wrapped up. But until that time, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. And we will talk to you next week. Take care.